Recording. Yep, recording started. So over to you, Imran.
Okay, good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're dialing in from the world. Whether you're live right now or you're watching this on YouTube, the session is recorded. If you don't want your picture to be visible on camera, please turn your webcam off now. Thank you for joining the Bradford Cloud User Group April 2023 virtual event. Obviously means a lot of you coming on. We've not had an event for about a few months now, so we're kind of back, and we'll hopefully have an event every month. Just before I move on to the next slide, if there's anybody out there watching on YouTube or watching now, if you want to present a session on BradCog, whether you're new to public speaking, whether you're an expert, please get in touch, right? If you want to share your knowledge, you want to share some demos, please feel free to get in touch with any one of us. Our details are on screen, twitter.com/BradCog, meetup.com, we're also on there, and on YouTube, where this video will be uploaded to after the event, obviously. So today we have two community, I would say, stars, legends, joining us with two amazing sessions. So the agenda, session 1, we have Codespaces and Copilot by April Edwards, followed by a Q&A. So you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Now, it totally depends on the presenters, right? If they ask you to come off mute, and if they want to, they can say, any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. If you're obviously watching the recording, then you're not really going to be able to do much. You could always leave a comment on our YouTube channel, but feel free to ask questions in the chat. Unmute yourself when the presenters ask you to do so, or raise your hand. If you are dropping the questions in the chat and the presenters are not able to pick those questions up, we will pass them on to the presenter, April or Dean, after that session is over. Please ask questions, right? We want questions. Then we have session 2, Strengthening Endpoint Security by Dean Ellaby. Again, questions, please ask. There'll be a Q&A. And Dean loves questions. He's actually giving away, I'm sure April loves questions as well, but Dean's giving away some goodies. Dean has said he will give goodies away to the one who asks the best question. And I'm going to give you a tip. He loves licensing questions, right? So you might impress him if you ask him a really, really cool licensing question. So yeah, ask questions, and a number of questions may get picked. And if Dean likes that question, he will hand out a goodie. So yeah, make sure you fire those questions over. Just before I hand over to April, just some housekeeping. No question is a stupid question. So, we are all here to learn. If you have a burning question in your brain and you want to ask that question, please ask, right? You never know, there'll be someone else on the call who's thinking the same. I've had this many, many times before. Please ask the question. Now, if you ask me a question on how to fix a washing machine, I won't have a clue, but I won't class that as a stupid question. I'll class that as an off-topic question, and maybe someone like Simon might know how to fix it. He's normally the handy guy. But yeah, just keep the questions on topic. Let's have a laugh. Let's enjoy ourselves. And please ask. If you're not going to ask, you're not going to learn, right? No one's going to judge you. So please ask. Drop your questions in the chat or unmute yourself if the presenters ask, does anyone have any questions? Please ask, right? If not, we will pass the questions on. Please mute your mic. Please place your mic on mute if you don't have a question. We want to avoid any background noise, any disturbances, but most importantly, if you're having a private conversation with a family member, I don't know, maybe with your dog or your cat, we don't really want to hear that, right? It's obviously being recorded, and I'm sure you don't want us to listen into your private conversations. We don't know everything, and I'm sure the presenters will say the same thing. No one knows everything. If you ask a question and that question, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I will find out for you. So if we don't know the answer, or if April doesn't know the answer, or Dean doesn't know the answer, and no one else knows the answer, we'll find out, right? We're all humans. We're all here to learn. If you do know somebody who knows everything, I would personally want to meet them. I'll probably fly out and see them wherever they are. I don't think anybody knows anything, right? And finally, please be respectful. We have people on here, what, 15 now? From different parts of the world, different backgrounds, different roles. Just have fun, be respectful with each other, have a laugh, throw in some memes in the chat, but please be respectful, otherwise it's not going to be enjoyable. Just respect each other, right? And that is it, just a few rules. Hopefully everybody's going to abide to those rules. I will hand over to the first presenter, the awesome April Edwards. And yeah, bring in the questions, right? Just ask any questions you have. Are you all good, April?
I'm ready.
All yours.
I am ready. Hello, everyone. I'm April Edwards. I got to remember my job title now, Senior Enterprise Advocate at GitHub, recently from Microsoft. I'm also a DevOps practice lead. So what does that mean? I do a lot of DevOpsy things with tooling, people, and process. I'm based here in the UK, so not far from you all. I'm down in the south, actually. It's raining and miserable tonight, but that's okay. Yeah, so I'm actually going to encourage people to be a bit interactive and ask questions. Put it in the chat. I'll do my best to respond as we go. I'm going to keep this a very flexible, but more of a learning session. I do have slides, but I'm not going to go too more into slides because I want to do kind of an intro thing. We're going to build some stuff together and really see what happens. We're going to explore, and we learn by exploring, and that's why I really enjoy DevOps and what I do for a living, because I'm always learning along with you all. So every day is a school day for me. So let's go ahead and put a photo up, maybe a little bit of a slide deck. That's myself. We might have a dog joining us shortly. His name is Titan. He likes to make an appearance and drool on my shirt, so he might come say hello. He might come say hello to Alan and Adam. He's one of Adam's favorites. We'll see. We'll see if he makes an appearance. He's literally having a nap right now. Right. So I'm April Edwards. You all can reach out to me on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. So any questions that you don't ask tonight, you can always reach out to me after. Love questions. And again, it was stated in the beginning, there's no such thing as a dumb question. We're all on different journeys. We all have different backgrounds. So with that, I'm going to ask you all a question. How would you define DevOps? You can go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and try and move the slide. There we go. Go ahead and put that in the chat. How would you define DevOps? Automation. All right. It's on the slide, Shabazz. You cheated. You read the notes. Anyone else? Adam doesn't get to answer because he already knows. I see Simon typing. Anyone else? Anyone else? Organized dev environment and planning. Okay. Challenging at times. Yes, very challenging. DevOps is very, very challenging. People, process, and tooling. Alan cheated because he's also read the notes. So, but that's okay. You're allowed to cheat a little bit. Adam. So what is DevOps? So we're just going to level set, because what we're going to talk about tonight is products. So we define DevOps as a union of people, products, people, process, and products, or tooling, to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. So as technical bodies, we need to deliver value. And we're going to talk about the tooling. Tooling is really 10% of that journey. And the other 10% is the process side. We can put in process, and we've all been there. We've been in process-heavy organizations and not really, going anywhere, but really 80% is the people change. So the things we're going to talk about are tooling, but we're going to bring it down to the human level, because humans really make the tech and what we do. So what value are we delivering to our organizations? Okay. So how many of you today use a lot of tools in your day job? Yes, no, you guys can shout it out, put it in the chat. The world's a messy place, right? We use a lot of tools. We make investments in this tooling thinking it's going to be the magic bullet, and often it's really not. So we look at this into how we develop our DevOps life cycles and everything else. And we try to put all these tools in, and we're literally using a very different tool for everything we're doing across the board. And that is really tough. So I joined GitHub about 2 months ago because of the integration of the platform. It is not just a Git source control repository. It's a whole platform that empowers developers. And I'm going to say this word developer, and a developer's an interesting topic and up for debate. And Adam Jackson will know, if you throw out the phrase everyone is developer on Twitter, you will have an explosion of argument. But I'm going to go say everyone here is a developer. If you work in tech and you've told a machine to do something for you, you are a developer. So it's a very encompassing thing. And people are like, well, I don't write, all this code. Okay, but you write scripts. And Alan, absolutely, you're an IT pro, but I guarantee you, Alan, are you using scripts anywhere in your day job? PowerShell, exactly. You're a developer. So we use it as more of a marketing term, but it might come out of my mouth a little bit. But GitHub is there to help empower you to do more. So we are actually going to talk a little bit about PowerShell today. I like this slide because it talks about security, and everyone's like, I don't do security. And I agree with you. Security is hard. But when we look at the cost of a breach, that cost is more it hits us harder as an organization when we're in production. So we want to do things earlier and often. So what we really want to do is take the tooling that we're using in our day-to-day jobs and do that in our development phase, in the phase where we're writing our scripts, we're doing our things. Whether we're writing infrastructure as code or PowerShell, Bash scripts, or you're actually writing code and you're a front-end developer in the cloud, whatever, or back-end developer. It's cheaper to fix these things in that development phase. So I really like this phase. I like this slide because it talks about that and shows some dollar value to that. The other thing I want to talk about is, how many of you have heard of the breach from our little friends at Uber? Go ahead and just raise your hand or put a thumbs up in the chat if you want. Uber keeps having breaches, like repeatedly keeps having breaches. So whenever I talk about security breaches from development teams, Uber is always in the news. A lot of financial institutions have been in the news as well, especially in the US. But I like talking about Uber because most recently their breach was around a PowerShell script, and someone had put their password in the PowerShell script. Now we can say all day long, don't put your scripts in your PowerShell scripts. Don't put your passwords in your PowerShell scripts. Don't put your passwords anywhere in things you do. But we've all done it. We've rushed through a project, put our password somewhere, like in a plain text file, saved it somewhere safe, and how long does it take you to discover that you've left it there, right? Sometimes it lives there for the entire life of that server because we embed it somewhere. We put it somewhere really safe. Uber themselves put a password in their PowerShell script in a private repository, and someone gained access to that. And that cost them millions and millions of dollars. And the same thing happened to Uber in 2017, password in a plain text file in their GitHub repository, and someone breached that. So we need to look at how we bring these tools closer to the developer. And security is important, but you're gonna go, well, I don't do security. Yeah, you're right. I don't either, but we need to care about it, because when we have a security breach, our jobs are on the line. And I'll be really honest, the way the industry is going right now with tech jobs, tech's a really bizarre place for us because people are looking to optimize what they're doing, do more with less, as Microsoft has been saying repeatedly for a while. And we need to make sure we have job security, and making big mistakes, big boo-boos aren't great, right? We can have all sorts of issues. So how do we help our developers? So yes, LastPass is a really good example. Yes, I'm just reading all the comments. I believe that's from Alan. Yes, LastPass is another good example. Correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into my GitHub repository. So this is my GitHub repository. It's publicly facing. Let me make sure it's big enough for everyone. Is everyone happy with that view? Could anyone not see it? No answer is a good answer. All right. So real true story. I broke something recently, and Adam Jackson, who's on the call, can attest to this. I was in London with Adam at a Microsoft event just before, actually, no, I was part of GitHub when I did that. Got into London, plugged my laptop into the projector, and my laptop would not work. It wouldn't project. No idea why. Adam plugged his worked, and I was like, okay, that's cool. So I emailed him my PowerPoint deck, my slide deck, and I ran my entire demo from his machine. How did I do that? GitHub Codespaces. So we're going to talk about GitHub Codespaces now. I'm going to go ahead and go into Codespaces up here at the top, and we're going to click on that. Codespaces are a containerized environment in which to run your code. So how many of you out there use Visual Studio Code to write PowerShell, infrastructure as code, any of it? You can go ahead and throw hearts, thumbs up, whatever. Any reaction you want. Cool. some good VS Code folks. This is effectively VS Code in the cloud. The difference is that it's a secured developer environment. Again, they call it a dev environment, developer environment. That's why we have to get used to the word developer, and we have to get used to it and love it. And the reason why they brought this about is because how many of you work with folks with Macs or even Linux machines in your teams? And someone will say, well, it worked on my machine. I can't get to work over here. We get that so often. I mean, I've been in engineering teams where I always work on a Windows PC because I love my Windows Surface devices. Half my other teams in Macs, using their Mac devices. I do have a Mac. It's actually sitting behind me. So at an instance where my machine went down, I used Adam's Mac. It didn't matter what device I was on because I didn't have to worry about that machine anymore. I actually have, I was actually pinged by someone in the community the other day who went, yeah, my machine can't run VS Code. And I said, well, use a Codespace. Like, well, my machine can't run it. It was like, your machine doesn't need to. It's just a web browser. They gave it a shot and they went, oh my gosh, you're right. And they were like a university grad student. So they were trying to write code, but didn't have any means to do it. They were able to use a Codespace. So Codespace is going to be that containerized environment that we spin up in the cloud. So how do we get started with a Codespace? We have a couple ways to do it. There's two really easy ways. First is we have templates. I'm going to go ahead and spin up a template first. Now, the templates are limited in terms of what languages. And I would say without question, these are definitely more developer focused ones. Do I have anyone out there that writes JavaScript in the audience? Anyone? Sometimes. All right, we're going to go with sometimes. This is a perfect example. I'm going to use the JavaScript template. And when I click on that, it's going to spin up my Codespace. So we're going to let this spin it up and see what it does. It's going to build a Codespace. So a Codespace is a containerized environment. Like I've said, it uses compute on the back end. It actually runs in Azure. So it's hosted by GitHub, but runs in Azure. It will pull all the code together that you need from a repository, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is a template. So we're literally starting with none of our own code, but this is written in JavaScript. And we're all going to pretend that we don't know JavaScript, which is probably true of most of us. Okay. So it's going to spin up everything we need to run JavaScript. So we're going to see what it does. It's going to think about it. So this is a template. I didn't build this. This is giving me code. I can actually publish this as a GitHub page, as a website, effectively. I could even push it to Azure and publish it as a website there. I have a lot of things I can do. So I've managed to break my Codespaces recently, and it still doesn't seem to be working 100%, but we will get through the demo mostly with what we need to do. So this is still building it. Let me go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. All right, so this is my Codespace. It looks just like VS Code. The really cool thing about Codespaces is it's loading up all my extensions. So I have all my extensions synced across from VS Code. I'll show you how you can even open this up in VS Code in a minute as well. Down here on the left-hand side, it says Codespaces. It tells me what branch I'm working off of. And this is building everything. So remember, this is a template for JavaScript. I don't know much about JavaScript, but I can figure it out, I'm sure. So we can see here that it's pulling up. Oops, let's go back to that. Pull that here. See if I can pull up a side view. I can't right now. That's okay. This has pulled everything I need to run a JavaScript website per that template. So if we go back to the templates here, a React website using JavaScript, sorry. This is all the code we need. So we could go ahead and customize this, which is pretty cool. We could launch this to Azure. We could put this in a GitHub page. We have all sorts of things we can do, but this has built us a basic website with all the code we need. I think a better practical use for us is going into a repository we know and love. So this is my own repository, and I work with a lot of IT pros that go, why do I need GitHub? So in this case, this is building a website in real life in Azure. I also have some infrastructure as code in it. So I want to write some bicep to go with it. And this has some bicep files. I want to go back to my infrastructure and go, oh, it has some Terraform in there. Maybe I need to write some Terraform for this. But this is a real life website. And if I ask you as an IT pro to say, hey, help me get started. If you think of getting started on a project, you have to, normally you'd go down to your code here, click on local, and you clone your code, and you have to get started. You need all the prerequisites to get started. So you need, if we're going to be writing, let's say, Terraform infrastructure as code here, we're going to need to get all the things we need to write Terraform, right? We got to download Terraform, etc. By building what we call a dev container, which is what this is, okay, with all these files, this tells me everything I need. I can literally start writing my website right here, right now, okay? I don't need anything else to do that. I can see my index page right here, and we could get going with the website. That's all we would need to do. But I want to use the code we have because we're going to focus more on the infrastructure as code side. So the templates are great. They're not as probably in most of the use cases what all of us will be using. We probably be using infrastructure as code. Are more templates coming? Absolutely. So I'm going to spin up a code space from this existing repository because I actually want to look at infrastructure as code. Does anyone have any questions about code spaces in general while we're here?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, April.
Yep.
Does it cost or is it free?
So there is a cost. So let this one spin up and I'll show you what it's doing. So this one's actually spinning up on my repository, so my own code. So this is using compute. So the really cool thing about a code space is that you're not using the compute on your machine. You are using the compute in Azure. When you spin that up, my code spaces default to 2 gigs of RAM and 2 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM. We can scale that up. So if you think of your local machine, and in the case where mine just completely didn't work and I'd use Atoms, it didn't really matter. In the case where I work with a lot of people who are given machines that are maybe old, and I know that hardware refresh is getting a lot tighter at organizations, and if your machine's 3 and 4 years old, it might not have had a lot of RAM behind it to run what you need to run. You can up that compute. So I'm running the code space here, and while that's all loading, I'm just going to show you all how that's done. When I click on Manage Code Spaces, I can see that I'm running this code space here. They give them really cool names. This one's called Fantastic Robot. You definitely can't, So it is still building it as we speak, but it's giving me 2 cores right now and 4 gigs of RAM, but it can span up to 32 gigs. So when I click on the 3 dots here, I can rename it. I can export some changes, and I can change this machine type. So it says I have 2 core, 4 gigs of RAM. That's a base build. I can scale this up to 32 gigs of RAM with the 2 core. So if I start running like tests or a lot of code, the code space will go, hold on, you're just smashing your utilization. Do you want to up your machine type? Yes. So you're only paying for what you use. So when I'm done with my code, so in this instance over here where I'm running this code space, I literally would shut this down, and then it stops the billing cycle. So you're allocated time and allocation for compute every month on these. But this is the one I'm running here. So it's still pulling all the data through as it's loading. So it took a couple minutes to build. Yep, and I can see my utilization here. I'm using 1.88 gigs of RAM and storage. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. But I can see the exact same code that I saw in my repository, and I can now do stuff with my code. I am currently working off my main branch, and we can do all sorts of cool stuff. So the other cool thing about a code space is I talked about all the extensions being here. You can literally run and debug your code. You can run live share. So I could literally initiate a live share session with any of you right now. Put it in the, actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start a live share session with all of you. So I want to share this session with you. And it's going to pop up a lot of stuff. I don't want to start a call. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the comments, and I want a couple of you to join. And we should be able to see your names crop up and your cursors crop up in here. Putting a little bit of pressure on you all to participate tonight. Learning experience. Someone's got to join. Come on, guys. There's Shabazz. All right. So we can see Shabazz has joined. It is loading. It is also dependent on your internet. So if you don't have internet, this will not work. And what I'm about to do also takes internet with Copilot. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, we got 4 of us working on this. Let's make some changes. All right, so before we make some changes, I just want to see us make some changes, and then I'm going to have you all test Copilot. We'll talk about Copilot in a minute. So yeah, I can live share. So this is a great way when you're working on a problem and you want to share this with your team, or you want to rubber duck, bang heads with someone. I can do this from here. The other thing is, if you are working in Visual Studio Code, this feature is also available. You can open this up in Visual Studio Code. You can be working anywhere in the world. The other really cool thing is not only when your machine dies, but if you go on holiday and work calls you and go, we've got a priority 1, a P1, we need to fix this thing, or, everyone's getting fired, because I've had those calls before. And you're at like your parents' house and you don't have access to your work laptop, which is good because you're on holiday and you should have it anyways. You can go to a web browser, get into your Codespace and do this. And that's exactly what I did with Adam. I spun up this exact same demo, running around, and I could work and it wasn't a problem. My demo was absolutely seamless, except for the fact that GitHub Actions had an actual outage at the very moment I was doing my demo. So that sucked, to say the least of it, but that happens, right? We've all been there. So I'm going to go into our code, and let's go into our infrastructure as code. Where is of course, everything wants to update. All right, who's pink? Let's see. Imran. All right. I'm going to give you a challenge. Imran, do you prefer Terraform or Bicep?
Let's go for Bicep.
All right. So I've got a file here. I want you to write a new module for us. But I'm asking you to do this without using Google or anything else. Have you ever used Copilot before?
Nope.
Good. We're going to use it. So Copilot's pretty simple. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, create a Bicep module. What do we want to deploy?
Avena.
See if it works. And subnet. Yeah, why not? Let's see if it will do it. Bicep's thinking about it. There we go. All right. So to get Copilot triggered, I have it installed on my in my repository. I have it configured. Okay, so you do have to enable it. So I don't know how to write a Bicep module without my friend Google or copying and pasting someone else's code. I don't write Bicep a lot. I understand it. I can read it. I can troubleshoot it. But like net new is probably where I really struggle. And I'll be honest and open about that. So when you do kind of 2 slashes, you say what you want to do. Now there's 2 really good reasons behind it. You tell Copilot what you want to do. But what's really important is putting notes in our code, whether it's PowerShell, infrastructure as code, it is best practice, because when you did something, will you remember why you did that 3 weeks from now? Probably not. And if someone else has to pick up what you've written, whatever code you've written or template, will they understand what you've done? Probably not. So I like putting lots of comments in my code. So by adding this comment, Copilot's reading it and going, oh, okay. So it's going to say module VNet, and all I have to do is hit tab and it accepts it. Now it has put in some generic things. Actually, it's picked up that we've used a parameter string here for location. So if we go up here for location, we've put in a parameter for West Europe. It picked that up for us. I didn't have to do that. So it gives us the scope. Resource group name, it's picked that up. It's actually read our code and gone, oh yeah, this is what you want. It's told us what we wanted. Now I would go with this. Like, I would have no other reason other than, I would go with this. Now, the only thing I would probably do was create parameters for VNet and subnet. So that would be for me. So there's a couple things we can do. We can go param. What is it? It's the, oh, look, it's telling us how to do it. So if I hit tab, it fills it in for us. And if I go, holy crap, it's done it. It's picked up our subnet. And I just hit tab and I accept it. So I want to pick on, let me see who's in the live share real quick. I'm going to pick on David because I don't know David in real life, I don't think. Do I know you, David?
No.
Okay. All right. So we've created a bicep module to deploy a VNet and a subnet. Would you be so kind to take your cursor and create something else for us?
I am not a coder, so you'll need to prompt
That's
me.
okay. So and that's exactly the point. So we just asked we just asked Copilot to create a bicep module to deploy a VNet. Tell it what you want it to do. Like, and the thing I'll say is it's really good. It really prefers using specifics. Maybe you want to create a virtual machine, or we could do a AKS. We could do all sorts of things. Whatever it is you normally deploy. If it's a virtual machine, an AKS cluster. Just tell it to deploy an AKS cluster.
And then how did you get that to read Copilot?
Go back up to just backspace up and just hang out there for a minute. It's reading it. So
Okay.
if the little guy right here kind of flashes. So if I leave my cursor at the end, it kind of picked it up. Yeah, there we go. So when I hit enter, he picked it up. When I say he, I don't know if it's a he or she. The little Copilot frog. I think it's a frog. I don't know. So it tells you here you can accept with tab, like if I just hover over it. So why don't you go ahead and accept this and just use tab?
See, I don't see it on my Visual Studio Code.
Oh, okay. Then I'll hit tab.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
okay, but you've just you just created an AKS cluster for us with the bicep. Now if I go back into our code here, so we've put this into a main file, but it hasn't created a actual bicep file for each element. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create they've called it aks.bicep here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one and call it aks.bicep. Now there is a new version of Copilot out called Copilot X, and it goes a lot further than this. I'm not allowed to demo it in real life yet because there isn't any announcement about when it's going to be available, but it does things like add comments. It helps you with pull requests, it helps you with all these things. So David, you've just created this AKS cluster and they've called it module AKS. And again, we can accept the defaults. We can do something else. And you can also see here that it's, oops, sorry. It's just taken in the parameters that we declared up there, and we don't have any new parameters this time. So you may not have been able to see it on your side, but I could see it on mine. So that's okay. It's a good thing to know with Copilot. So when we create this aks.bicep file, I don't know what we need to put in there. So, I mean, I can look at the one that I've created before, which is definitely very valid. I want to tell Copilot create a bicep file to deploy AKS. Yes, cluster. An AKS cluster. And give it a moment. I can see it's thinking. Okay, that's not what I want. I want to create the resource. So bicep is very literal. See what it does. There's also probably a better way to ask what I'm trying to ask it to do. So it's done it in. Okay. Okay, I see what it's done. All right, so this is where Copilot can be difficult. So I understand enough about Bicep and everything else to know what it's done. So I'm going to accept what it's done. It's done this in TypeScript. Wouldn't be how I would normally do it. So if I go to this web app file, this is how I would normally call it. Okay, so use a very similar format to we did in the main file. So when you're learning a new language, and it could be something as simple as PowerShell, another infrastructure as code type thing, this is where it's good to have some knowledge of the product. So I usually take like a working example, like I would take this web app thing and go, oh, I want to declare a resource, but with the AKS cluster. So I might just go back to what it's created and going, yeah, I don't like this. I might actually just create the first line here and just go resource and see if it comes out. If I type in AKS, what it does. Okay. That's not what I want. No, I don't want to get that. So Bicep's trying to figure out what I want. So Bicep's trying to get what I want by what I'm typing. No, don't want that either. So it's not 100%. So where is Bicep really good? Trying to figure this stuff out, trying to write code for us, but you have to know what to ask it for. So in the main file, we called that module without a problem. We didn't get to build our resource out how we wanted it, but that's okay. We can fix that. But David, thank you for being a guinea pig. So yes, it hasn't worked out my Bicep file yet. So even though I've named it aks.bicep, it hasn't picked up the formatting I want to use. So it creates this code based off of public repositories. That's how it knows what to do it. So that's okay. But no, David, I appreciate you being the guinea pig. So, but we can tell it what to do. We can ask it to do other things as well. I could say create. So it's asking me to do the same thing. Nope, create test for Bicep code. Let's see if it'll do anything with that. Maybe. Anything? Is it thinking? No, because it's a blank file. So yeah, I would say start with something. It usually works. It's okay, David. That's okay. Do you want to create a VM instead? Yeah, so it's using public repositories to build off that knowledge base. So when you're using PowerShell, it can be really difficult in the sense that PowerShell doesn't have a lot of doesn't have enough sample code to kind of feed the machine. So when we talk about GitHub Copilot, I call it our AI pair programmer. Okay. It's like our buddy. It's our rubber duck. So David, you and I could sit here and figure out how to do this, and we absolutely would. We'd spend more time on it. I would actually probably look up a little bit more on the format. I'd probably like copy and paste this out maybe, and maybe if I'd like copied this out and we did a different way, copied our parameters and left this, because we can see Docker registry right in there. Docker registry host. Maybe it might pick it up. Create. See if it does anything different. Maybe. Thinking about it. Thinking about it. Oh, didn't do anything. Let's go to deploy. Let's use the word deploy. See if it does anything there. So yeah, so David, we can take ourselves like net new. So this will work. This will actually be fine for what we're trying to do. That's actually where we want to be. All right, it gave me what I wanted finally. All right. Yes, it is. That is true. Kubernetes is Greek for captain. All right, so we finally got there. We probably need to do a little bit of research, David, if we've never deployed to AKS of what we wanted to look at, but this has finally spat out what we wanted to. And again, if we went to the top, it would add the other parameters that we needed. So where we've also have like name agent pool, we could totally, again, add a parameter for that. And param, tab that, param, client ID string. So it would start pulling up the things we're calling in here. So client secret, client ID. It knows we've used it in our code. So look, David, you and I, you've never done AKS. That's cool. But it has gotten us to where we need to go pretty much. So that's gotten us most of the way there. So it is definitely your rubber duck, and it really helps you get to that place you want to be. So if you're working in PowerShell or Bash scripting or Python, because you do a lot with VMware, this is a great place to be. Start enabling GitHub Copilot. So the way I like to think of it is, I've been using ChatGPT to start a question, to ask like, hey, how do I do this with this? Instead of going to, whatchamacallit, what's the website that I go and get all my answers from before ChatGPT? Sorry, it's late in the day. My brain's not working.
Google?
No, no, Stack Overflow. Thank you, Fran. Oh, someone, thank you. So I used to go to Stack Overflow a lot. So instead of going to Stack Overflow, I will literally type my question into ChatGPT. The problem with ChatGPT is it's not always readily available. So I found it that can go down quite a lot. It can be really busy. But Copilot works on the fly all the time. Now, again, it does require internet. So I literally sat at a PowerShell conference last year and was like, oh, I'm going to do PowerShell with Copilot. And the internet in the hotel wasn't strong enough. I know my internet at home is plenty strong. Yes, and you can Bing it. And David, Bing didn't have its amazing features. But yes, you can go to Bing and like, how do I get started with, you can do exactly that. I've got my Bing search over here. I can chat to Bing and ask it. And then that's a good starting point. So we could also go to Bing, ask it how to create a Kubernetes cluster. And we could start there. So we could ask Bing how to do it in the Bing chat. It could spit it out, and we could use that hand in hand with Copilot to actually write the code to do it. So when I've used ChatGPT or Ping, I will literally copy and paste that code into VS Code and then try to run it. So it is giving us, it sends us to a tutorial. Okay, so Bing's cool for sending you to websites. Bing doesn't give you the answer. ChatGPT will actually spit out the code for you. So I find ChatGPT a lot more helpful in that sense. But Copilot is great for getting all these things written as well. So yeah, so David, thank you. Give David a round of applause. He deployed it. Well, he wrote the code for an AKS cluster. We got most of the way there. And he's never done it before. Doesn't know what an AKS cluster is. So that's a great effort. But again, it's about knowing what to ask it. And that's probably the hardest part of using Copilot. So when I don't do the same demo over and over, I'm like, oh, did I ask it the right question? And sometimes it gives me different answers. So sometimes writing PowerShell, it spits out something very differently than what I would have done, which is okay. It's another method, right? So I will look at it and go, does this work? Is it valid? And I'll test it. I'll just test it every time. So quite often I will, test out my code, see if it works. It may not always be the best way, but this is great for various reasons. I mean, first of all, David, it's helped you get the code you need to deploy an AKS cluster in Bicep. You've never done it before, and all of us could watch and participate and partake in that. We could share that experience through live share. And it's done, and it's easy. And we've all done this from a browser, so we didn't need to do it from VS Code or locally. And that's really cool. The other thing I really find helpful about Copilot when you're trying to write code, it's a great way to skill up. Second, I'm going to talk about language barriers. So I often work with people across the globe. English is their second language, but they write their code in English. And I am amazed because I try to speak their language and I'm fumbling, but they spend their day writing in English, a lot of them. So it can help you do that. Copilot can also help you write things in another language. I did a demo with someone where we literally wrote things in Spanish. I could probably create a new file here and just call it, where did this file go to? Let me just do it there. There it is. Where should we call it? Something .md. Just called a markdown file. Write some Bicep. No, write some Java. Write something in Spanish. And let's see what Copilot does. I did the dudes the wrong way. No, did the correct way. It's in Markdown. I don't know if it'll work. Let me make this a... let's do a something dot PS. Oops. PS1. There we go. Write something in Spanish. We'll see if it will Copilot pick that up. No, it's not doing that. Write a simple PowerShell script in Spanish. Oh, that's cheating because it's just picking up. Just picking up paths. All right. So that one didn't work. But I've done it before with other coding languages where we've done stuff. So when you work with folks that where English isn't their first language, it's great. Now, I'll be honest, being an American that lives in England, I struggle with the S and the Z interchangeability. And I was actually working on an engineering project with a colleague who spelled something with an S instead of a Z, and it broke his code for like 4 or 5 hours. And he couldn't find it because it is the correct spelling. And he had like a dictionary added into our code repo, so it did recognize British English because we were writing a lot of documentation in these alongside our code files, and it didn't pick it up because why would it, right? But yeah, so it does great things like that. It's also great from a diversity and inclusion point of view. You know, I also find that we all learn to do things in different places in our life. So David, you've never worked with AKS. There's probably a few people in here that have. There's probably people in here that have never done anything with Bicep that are watching this and going, I've never done that before. You know, we've all had these different backgrounds. And when you start learning a language or a tech, you learn in the way that you've learned in. And also a lot of us have different capabilities learning. We learn in different ways. We have different ways of writing code and scripts and everything. This is kind of leveling the playing field, and it's enabling us to work faster and better. So if I was trying to write that Bicep file on my own without any Bicep knowledge, or if David, I gave you a piece of homework and said, go write me this Bicep file, it would probably take you a few hours, probably. The other thing is there's a lot of context switching that goes on when we're writing scripts or trying to do something and automate something. We're going off and using Google or Bing or ChatGPT. And then when you start using this thing, you're like, oh, there's this other thing that popped up in my search. I'm just going to go look here, or the dog's barking, or children are crying, or the pizza's arrived. We have all this context switching that can happen a lot. So avoiding that context switching is really important. So I'm going to open up for questions. So I've showed you all code spaces. We've worked everything in a code space. We've gotten Copilot to write some Bicep for us. Really simple examples, but really fun because we could all do it together. So who has questions? Comments? Could be about anything. I might be able to get the dog up here in a second as well.
April, it's Alan here. If you're using Codespaces and you've got a fairly locked down, secure Azure environment, is there any way around that at all? So
great question. There is something coming soon. It is publicly on the GitHub roadmap about private VNet integration into Azure. Yes, it's coming. I do a lot of work with financial industries and government agencies, and this has been asked. It is coming. I don't have a date. I'll be honest, a lot of the roadmap stuff at GitHub is like tentative, but same thing with Microsoft, right? We put stuff on the roadmap and it gets pushed or moved. It is absolutely coming. And Fran asked, are there any extra things we need to test with Copilot generated code? Fran, I'm going to assume you mean like if it generates code, do we need to test it? How do we test it? How do we look at it? I always say to run it. I think it's also true of when we're writing code, like, is our way the best way? How do we know? Like, and when we talk to developers all around the world, you know, we all have different ways of doing things, different experiences. And yes, David, you could absolutely use it to create tests. So things like PowerShell tests, even stuff with Terraform testing and TerraGrunt, absolutely. It is great for writing tests. The new Copilot X that is coming out can do all that for you as well. And it's voice activated and chat activated. So it's also really good at doing that. It's probably a couple steps beyond in that instance in Copilot X. Unfortunately, I can't show it, but it's going to get even better. But yes, you can write a test. So in our Bicep code, Bicep I find tougher to write tests for. but let me go into I broke it. But yes, there are better way to write tests. So yes, going to absolutely write tests for you. So it kind of auto-completed if the user is logged in. So yeah, it gives you a few options here, and then it can generate that for you. So it depends on what you want to ask for. You do have to be pretty literal with it as well. Oh yeah, Alan just put a link in for testing some bicep modules. Thank you. I tend to put my bicep tests into the pipelines. So let's see if there's any in here that we can pull out. There is activity log alerts, application insights.
There's some stuff in there. If you dig into the actual modules, they have some test things around them.
So it's interesting. This PS rule is actually one of the repos that I've been working on. So if we pull up their stuff, yeah, we can do some stuff with them. Yeah, I've actually been working with PS rule on some of the bicep testing in the last year or so. And I think, and this was just updated the other day, so that's really good. Cool. Thank you, Alan, for sharing that. But yeah, the PS rule stuff is pretty cool. I have somewhere PS rule, PS cones. It's in one of my many. There we go. Yes, so the actual Azure team has published PS rules as a repo as well, so you can get a lot of their code and tests in here as well. Highly recommend for bicep and anything with PowerShell. Any other questions? I can't get the dog up. He is literally sleeping in front of my desk on the floor and not interested in moving from that position, unfortunately. So sorry, Alan. Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we'll hand it back to you guys.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Thanks, April. That was a really interesting demo.
So I broke a few things today, but good news, it didn't stop the demo. So so I hope everyone learned something about Codespaces and Copilot today. And by the way, GitHub is very picky about how they brand everything.
Mm-hmm.
So Microsoft has been spelling things a little differently for their Copilot launch. It is a capital C for both and no other uppercase, no other spaces. So if you guys start doing talks and playing with it, highly recommend you don't anger the marketing folks at GitHub, because I have repeatedly already. So yeah.
Thanks,
Cool.
April. Does everyone
Thanks,
just want to quickly
guys.
come off mute and give a round of applause? Very virtual user group thing to do.
It's like being in real life.
Well, just a comment really, because you mentioned running it in Visual Studio Code, Copilot. So I'm running it in code at the moment, so it just required a plugin. That's all it asked for.
Yeah.
So that was really simple and easy to do. So I was quite impressed.
Yeah.
It's not something I don't really code, but I found that quite easy.
It is just a plugin you can enable. And then if you're in a GitHub repo, you can enable it for all your repos in your organization. So if you're working for a company or you got your own, you can enable it for every single repository. So when you open up a code space, it enables. But yes, if you're in VS Code, you can just get the plugin for it as an extension and you're good to go.
And what I like was it runs it in restriction mode because I don't trust it. So it asks you, do you want to trust it to actually make changes to it? I found that quite an interesting feature.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually I don't do much in VS Code anymore. So after the incident, well, actually I'll say this, after moving to GitHub, because I have a Mac for work that I never use. It's a nice doorstop that sits behind me. And then I have my Windows PC that I actually do coding on because I just now work in Codespace. So it's irrelevant. But the biggest thing for me is some of the Windows features that I don't have on the Mac. That I'm really spoiled by, like multiple screens and stuff, because it's how I like to visualize things as multiple screens, and the Mac just doesn't do that as cleanly. And I know you can get a third-party tack-on app. I don't love it. So anyways.
Cool. Thank you.